When Jake announced he was marrying Lisa, the reactions were anything but joyful. His friends gave him uneasy smiles, his parents exchanged worried glances, and his colleagues whispered behind his back. "She's not the right one for him," they said. "He'll regret this." Lisa wasn't what they expected. She was different. Too quiet, too mysterious, too unpredictable. Everyone was certain that Jake was making the biggest mistake of his life. But 2 years later, the very people who doubted their marriage found themselves wishing they had never judged so quickly. Because by then, everything had changed. Jake never forgot the way people looked at Lisa, the silent judgments, the cautious smiles that masked disapproval. Even at their wedding, he could feel the tension in the room, as if the guests were waiting for something to go wrong. But Lisa never reacted to any of it. She simply held his hand, smiled at him in that quiet way she always did, and whispered, "As long as we have each other, nothing else matters." At first, their life together was simple. Lisa loved working in her small art studio, filling their home with paintings that seemed to hold hidden stories. Jake, a journalist, often came home late, but he always found Lisa waiting for him with a cup of tea and a gentle touch on his shoulder. To him, she was everything, his peace, his home. But to the outside world, Lisa was strange. She never talked much at social gatherings. She rarely shared anything about her past. And then there were the rumors. The way some people said they had seen her standing alone in the rain for hours, lost in thought, or how she always carried an old, worn-out locket but never spoke about it. Then, one day, the truth began to unravel. Jake came home to find Lisa sitting in the dark, holding a letter with trembling hands. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with tears she wasn't letting fall. When he knelt beside her and asked what was wrong, she only said, "There's something I never told you." And that was the moment everything changed. Jake never forgot the way people looked at Lisa, the silent judgments, the cautious smiles that masked disapproval. Even at their wedding, he could feel the tension in the room, as if the guests were waiting for something to go wrong. But Lisa never reacted to any of it. She simply held his hand, smiled at him in that quiet way she always did, and whispered, "As long as we have each other, nothing else matters." At first, their life together was simple. Lisa loved working in her small art studio, filling their home with paintings that seemed to hold hidden stories. Jake, a journalist, often came home late, but he always found Lisa waiting for him with a cup of tea and a gentle touch on his shoulder. To him, she was everything, his peace, his home. But to the outside world, Lisa was strange. She never talked much at social gatherings. She rarely shared anything about her past. And then there were the rumors. The way some people said they had seen her standing alone in the rain for hours, lost in thought, or how she always carried an old, worn-out locket but never spoke about it. Then, one day, the truth began to unravel. Jake came home to find Lisa sitting in the dark, holding a letter with trembling hands. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with tears she wasn't letting fall. When he knelt beside her and asked what was wrong, she only said, "There's something I never told you." She handed him the letter, and he hesitated before unfolding it. The handwriting was unfamiliar, delicate yet firm. As his eyes scanned the words, his breath caught. "Lisa, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I don't even know if you'll want to see me again. But I need you to know that I never stopped looking for you. I never stopped loving you. If you can find it in your heart to meet me, I'll be waiting. Same place as before." Sunday at sunset. M. Jake's fingers tightened around the paper. He looked up at Lisa, his mind racing. M? Who was M? Lisa exhaled shakily, finally allowing a tear to slip down her cheek. Before you, there was someone else, she admitted. Someone I thought I had lost forever. The room felt smaller, the silence heavier. Jake's heart pounded in his chest, not from anger, but from something deeper, fear. He had always known Lisa carried secrets, but he had never imagined this. Did you love him? He asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, as if searching for the right words. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know if love ever truly leaves. Jake felt something inside him twist painfully. He had fought for Lisa when no one else believed in their love. But now, as he stared at the letter in his hands, he realized there was a part of her he had never truly known. And now he had to decide whether he was ready to. Jake stared at the letter, his hands tightening around the fragile paper. His mind raced with questions, but none of them had simple answers. Who was M? What had happened between them? And most importantly, was Lisa still in love with him? Lisa sat in silence, her fingers tracing the edge of her locket. She had never spoken much about her past, and Jake had never pressed her. He had believed that love was about moving forward, not digging into what came before. But now, for the first time, he wondered if she had been running from something or someone all along. Do you want to see him? Jake finally asked, his voice careful, measured. Lisa hesitated. Then, in a whisper, she said, I don't know. It was the kind of answer that held 1,000 emotions: fear, uncertainty, longing. Jake swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay calm. Then I'll go with you. Lisa's eyes snapped up to meet his, surprise flickering across her face. You would do that? I promised you forever, Lisa. His voice softened. That means standing beside you, even when it's hard. Lisa let out a shaky breath, and for the first time that night, a small, sad smile touched her lips. She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. Thank you. The sky was painted in warm shades of orange and purple as they drove in silence toward the meeting place, a small park just outside the city. Lisa had barely spoken all day, her fingers nervously twisting her locket. Jake, on the other hand, couldn't stop thinking. What if this man wanted Lisa back? What if Lisa wanted to go back? The thought sat heavy in his chest. When they arrived, Lisa stepped out of the car first, her hands clenched at her sides. Jake followed a step behind, his heart hammering. And then they saw him. A man stood near the edge of the park, hands in his coat pockets, staring off toward the horizon. He looked about their age, but there was something weathered about him, like someone who had carried too many regrets for too long. Lisa inhaled sharply. Michael. The man turned at the sound of his name, and when he saw Lisa, something in his expression broke. He took a step forward, his voice barely above a breath. Lisa, it's really you. Jake clenched his fists but stayed silent. This wasn't his moment, it was Lisa's. Lisa stood frozen, eyes searching Michael's face as if trying to confirm he was real. Then, in a trembling voice, she said, I thought you were dead. Lisa and Michael had been inseparable. They had grown up together, fallen in love, and dreamed of a future. But then came the accident. A fire had broken out in Michael's apartment building. Lisa had arrived just in time to see the flames swallowing everything. The firefighters told her there were no survivors from the upper floors. And just like that, the love of her life was gone. She had spent months drowning in grief, trying to move on, trying to breathe again. And then she had met Jake. He had been kind, patient, never demanding more than she could give. Slowly, he had pulled her back to life. But now, standing here, facing Michael, alive, everything she had rebuilt began to shake. "I tried to find you," Michael said, stepping closer. "I woke up in the hospital with no memory of who I was. It took me years to piece everything back together." His voice broke. "I never stopped loving you." Lisa's breath hitched. Jake's stomach twisted. This was the moment that would decide everything. Jake turned to Lisa, his heart pounding. "Lisa," he said gently, "what do you want?" Lisa's eyes flickered between the two men, the man she had lost and the man who had found her. Tears welled in her eyes. Her lips parted. And then, Lisa stood frozen between two worlds, one she had mourned and one she had built. Her breath felt shallow, as if the weight of time itself had settled on her chest. Michael, the man she had once loved so deeply, was alive. A miracle, a cruel twist of fate. And then there was Jake, the man who had pulled her from the darkness, given her a new kind of love, patient and steady. She looked at Jake, his expression calm but his eyes carrying the unspoken fear of a man who knew he might lose the woman he loved. And then she looked at Michael, his face raw with emotion, a man who had come back from the dead, hoping to reclaim what was once his. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "I don't know what to do." Jake exhaled slowly. "Then let's figure it out together." Michael's brows furrowed. "Lisa, I know this is overwhelming, but you don't have to think about it. You loved me once. I know you still do." Jake clenched his jaw but stayed silent. He had promised himself he wouldn't force her into a choice. He would stand beside her, even if it broke him. Lisa took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Michael, for 2 years I thought you were gone. I tried to survive that loss. I tried to move forward." Her voice wavered as she glanced at Jake. "And then I met someone who showed me love in a different way. Not the kind that sweeps you off your feet, but the kind that catches you when you're falling." Michael's face fell. "Are you saying you love him?" Lisa closed her eyes, her hands trembling. "I don't know if love ever truly leaves, Michael. But I do know that I can't erase the last 2 years of my life." Silence settled between them. Jake finally spoke. "Maybe it's not about choosing between the past and the present." Lisa turned to him, confused. "What do you mean?" Jake looked between her and Michael. "You don't have to decide today. You don't have to decide at all. Love isn't a choice you make in a single moment. It's a journey." He took Lisa's hand. "Maybe the real question isn't who you choose, but what you need to heal." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. Michael ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "So what now?" Lisa wiped her eyes, her heart heavy but no longer paralyzed. "Now, I need time. I need to understand what all of this means. For me, for both of you." Michael nodded slowly, though pain flickered in his eyes. Jake squeezed her hand gently, offering her strength without expectation. And for the first time that evening, Lisa felt like she could breathe. As they turned to leave, a shadow moved from behind a tree. Someone had been watching, someone who wasn't supposed to be there. A voice, low and unfamiliar, cut through the quiet. "So, you're still alive after all, Michael?" Lisa froze. Jake instinctively stepped in front of her. Michael's body went rigid. The past wasn't just knocking on the door. It was kicking it wide open. Lisa, Jake, and Michael turned toward the voice. A man stepped out of the shadows. A tall figure, dressed in dark clothing, his eyes sharp with recognition. "So, you're still alive after all, Michael?" Michael stiffened. Lisa felt Jake's grip on her hand tighten. "Who are you?" Jake asked, his voice firm. The man smirked, shaking his head. "Doesn't matter. What matters is that Michael here was never supposed to come back." Lisa's heart pounded. Never supposed to come back? Michael took a step forward. "What do you know about what happened to me?" The man tilted his head. "Everything." The air grew thick with tension. Lisa's voice was barely above a whisper. "The fire? It wasn't an accident, was it?" Michael's jaw clenched. "No. And I think I just found someone who knows why." Jake exhaled sharply. "Lisa, we need to go." Lisa hesitated, but Michael turned to her, his eyes serious. "Lisa, if you walk away now, you'll never know the truth." She swallowed hard. The past had come back to life in more ways than one. She looked at Jake, the man who had been her rock, and then at Michael, the man she once thought she had lost forever. And suddenly, she knew what she had to do. Lisa stepped forward, looking the stranger dead in the eyes. "Tell me everything." The truth had unraveled in ways none of them had expected. The fire that had nearly taken Michael's life had been no accident. It had been deliberate, an attempt to erase him. The man in the park had been part of it, though he had only been a small piece of a larger puzzle. Lisa had spent months untangling the secrets, standing beside both Jake and Michael as they uncovered the truth. In the process, she had also unraveled something within herself. She had loved Michael deeply, but that love belonged to a past that could never return. And she had fallen in love with Jake, not in the fiery, reckless way she once loved Michael, but in a way that made her feel safe, steady, and whole. And in the end, that was the love she chose. Michael understood. He had lost her once, and though it hurt, he knew now that some things, some people, weren't meant to be reclaimed. On a quiet evening, Lisa stood with Jake on their porch, watching the sunset. She reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "Everyone thought marrying me was a mistake," she murmured. Jake chuckled, pulling her closer. "And now?" Lisa smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Now they regret ever doubting us." And with that, the past was finally laid to rest.